George Demos is a candidate for Congress in New York's 1st District on Long Island. He joins us now from New York City. How are you?
Liz, thanks for having me.
It's great to see you. So you have been making a very interesting case here for a forgotten church that was actually destroyed on 9/11 completely and was supposed to do a land deal with the state, and that deal has been stalled ever since.
That's right. It's an absolute outrage what's happening down at Ground Zero. The St. Nicholas Church was the only house of worship destroyed on September 11th, and it hasn't been rebuilt. And more importantly than that, the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey is putting all sorts of bureaucratic roadblocks in the way of it being rebuilt. So I thought it was important to stand up and speak out as a candidate and to rally support to make sure that that church rises from the ashes.
Now, your argument is actually that Governor Paterson has been talking about some kind of land swap for the mosque that is proposed for 2 blocks away from Ground Zero, whereas this church actually was located quite close to Ground Zero as well and was supposed to get land in a 2004 agreement that George Pataki, the Republican governor, had signed. And you actually worked for George Pataki, did you not?
I worked on his campaign back when I was still in college. But yeah, Governor Pataki did exercise tremendous leadership and make sure that this was a priority. And I did call out Governor Paterson because he's shown so much concern for moving the mosque and finding a place for that it just struck me as odd that he wouldn't exercise the same concern for the Port Authority. We also mentioned that President Obama, and we wrote an open letter to the president about the fact that he went out of his way to make remarks publicly about the mosque's right to be built, but he's been absolutely silent on the church. So we thought it was important to call out the leaders who are so concerned about the mosque and the right of that mosque, and to tell them that it's also important that the only house of worship destroyed, the church, that be rebuilt first.
Now, you actually also have some support from Senate Minority Leader Dean Skelos. He is Greek Orthodox. Are you actually Greek Orthodox?
I am Greek Orthodox, but this issue transcends any particular denomination and any particular religion. It was a house of worship that many people attended, and it was a quiet place of respite for people at the crossroads of commerce. So it was important to people of all denominations, and it's important to our Judeo-Christian values that this church rises again.
Are you in contact regularly with the leadership of the church?
I have been briefed by them, and I am in communication with them, and I have spoken with them, yes.
The reason why I ask is because I actually got some information from the Port Authority on this, because it required actually a couple of calls, because this has been an issue that in all of the sort of mosque mania, this has been largely on the sidelines. But, you know, Mayor Bloomberg said recently that he thought there was an agreement imminent between the church and the Port Authority. Are you aware that that is in fact the case?
That agreement, there was no agreement, and for a year, the Port Authority has refused to meet with the church. And what I mean, there was no agreement, there was no final agreement. They agreed to move it to 130 Liberty Street, and that's where the new church would be located. The old location was going to be a loading dock, so it was not feasible for the church to be there. But the Port Authority, for over a year, has not met with the church and refuses to meet with them. And on top of that, they went ahead and excavated the site where the original church was without the church's permission. So they have not acted in good faith, and the Port Authority actually outright lied to the American people recently when they said that the church was just making too many demands. That's not right. And the Port Authority Director, Chris Ward, needs to stand up and do the right thing here.
Now, so you're saying that, my understanding was that there was supposed to be $60 million in public funds originally, $20 million of which was to go for the rebuilding of the church, and $40 million of which was to go for this vehicle security center at the new location, because the church was to be built on top of it, actually. Is that correct?
Well, the $40 million, as I understand it, was to build the foundation, and obviously that's the Port Authority's responsibility if they're going to build something underneath it. So their obligation was to provide a site that the church could build upon, and I believe the additional $20 million was for building the foundation on which the church could be built.
And then they are telling me now that the church actually has the right to be rebuilding on its original site, and they always have had that right, except for the little problem that the site is being excavated and they would have to wait until that excavation is complete.
Well, that's a very disingenuous, dishonest answer by the Port Authority. The fact is that they can't build there, and it's not an appropriate site to build on, because that will be the entrance to a loading dock. The agreement was made to move it to 130 Liberty Street. And the fact is that the Port Authority simply reneged on that a year ago. And successive Port Authority administrations have all agreed that this was the new location for it. But this is what happens when you have bureaucrats who aren't really accountable to anyone. The Port Authority answers to two governments, New York and New Jersey, but ultimately really answers to no one. So it's important for people to stand up and call these people out and say, look, do the right thing, make sure the church can be rebuilt.
Now, your position on the mosque is what exactly?
Well, I've called for an investigation on the funding and the sources of funding for that mosque. I think it's provocative, inappropriate, and wrong for that mosque to be there. And I think that the government's obligation is to investigate the sources of funding. The people who have come forward to advocate for that mosque and to build it are not people who have the funding to do this. As I understand it, one of the proponents is a recent waiter. I don't think he has that $100 million, so I don't want that money coming from terrorist regimes.
Because at this point, my understanding is the fundraising hasn't even started.
Well, my understanding is that the source of the funds was supposed to come from there, but my simple call was to investigate it and find out the background of who these people are. And if these people really wanted this as an olive branch, as a symbol of reconciliation, they would agree to move it voluntarily. So I'm very surprised, and it tells us that their real motivation may not be reconciliation.
Well, I want to thank you very much, George Demos, for joining us, and have a good evening.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.